I hope you didn't move this, Pastor Matt, because we did a mic check at the right level. So for those of you thinking I'm up here tonight because I'm jealous that David gave his faith story a couple weeks ago, I can assure you that is not the case. Instead, let this be a warning to you for next year. If your spouse agrees to do this and you see Dana walking towards you, you might want to turn and head the other way. Just kidding. To start with a little background about myself, I was a TV news producer for more than 30 years, 27 of them at KCAL here in Los Angeles. I had an opportunity to leave in December when the company offered buyouts, so I took it. I come from a family of 6, my mom, dad, and us 4 kids. My mom was from Minnesota and my dad from Iowa, so I was raised with Midwestern values. I grew up in a small town near Sacramento, and we were there because of my dad's job, a Lutheran minister. I was a PK, a preacher's kid, or as someone once told me if I want to do something different, a TO, a theologian's offspring. We weren't what some people think of as a stereotypical pastor's family, carrying a Bible with us all the time, or throwing out Bible verses in any conversation, praying everywhere we went. Nevertheless, it was not fun being a pastor's kid. I can tell you that. We couldn't afford the designer clothes so many other kids were wearing, but maybe the worst thing was that none of my friends wanted to say bad words around me. Which now, okay, that's good, but as a teenager, that's just about the worst thing that could happen. Of course, because my dad was a pastor, I grew up in the church. I had to go to church every Sunday. I had to wear a dress. My mother said it was disrespectful to God to wear jeans or shorts to church. We had to be at church half an hour early so that we could get our minds ready for service. But somehow that never really happened. We just sat there and talked. I did Sunday school. I was in the children's choir. I was the only one in my confirmation class who did it in 2 years because, of course, I had to go every week when everyone else got to go whenever they wanted. I always said I believed in Jesus, but it was really more because that was what I was told, what I always heard. When I left home for college at UC Berkeley, I stopped going to church. After all, I wasn't forced to go anymore, so I didn't. But my freshman year, there was a Lutheran church just a couple of blocks from where I lived. So one Sunday I thought, I really should go to church. So I did, but I didn't like it and never went back. When I went to graduate school at USC, I decided to go back to church. I don't know really why I wanted to, but I did. I was living in Venice and found a church in Santa Monica, Mount Olive Lutheran Church, that I actually really liked. I enjoyed the pastor's sermons, and I got this sense of peace when I was at service and took communion, something I had never felt in church before. But I didn't get involved there. After service, I just went home and carried on with my regular life. I was at a point in my life where I wasn't on a journey with God. I was really on a journey with myself. It's not that I actively avoided a relationship with God. I was just simply living my life. Lucky for me, though, just because I wasn't active in my faith life didn't mean God wasn't active with me. Because how else could I have gotten through? He had to be helping me because I couldn't have done life on my own. As I look back on it now, I can see instances in my life where God was with me. No, I didn't realize it at the time because I wasn't looking for him. I wasn't listening for him. So I'd like to share 3 of those instances with you tonight. The first was when my mom died when I was 16 years old. We had a typical mother-teenage-daughter relationship. In other words, we would fight a lot, and I would say mean things. One time before she got sick, and knowing me, it was probably more than one time, in the heat of an argument, I told her, I wish she was dead. I didn't mean it. She died February 15th, 1986. A little over a year earlier, she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. It obviously rocked our world. It also rocked our church. And it made some members question their faith. How could God let a preacher's wife get so sick? How could he let the mother of 4 kids get cancer? My mom had a mastectomy, then underwent chemo and radiation. The chemo made her so sick. Luckily, treatments have gotten so much better since then, but I remember hearing her throwing up in her bathroom after her treatments. One time we were watching a TV show. I don't remember what it was, but my mom got up and went back to her room. My dad asked us kids if we knew why she left, and we said no. Well, someone was getting married on the show, and my dad said that my mom knew she'd never see any of us get married, so it was just too hard for her to watch. Unfortunately, around Thanksgiving, we found out the cancer had spread to her brain. A couple of months later, she ended up in the hospital the last couple of weeks of her life. 2 days before she died, we were all there, and the doctor told us she might not make it through the night. Of course, we all got emotional and were crying, except for my mom. She said she felt so at peace. Now, my mom was probably the most faithful person I ever knew, so I'm sure that peace came from knowing she was going to be with God. But as a teenager, how do you possibly get through this, losing your mother? This is one of the times where I look back and say, it had to have been God. He had to have been walking right by my side. I just didn't know it at the time because I wasn't looking for him. I didn't have an active relationship, a mindful relationship with God. I was simply living my life. The second time God had to have been with me, even though I wasn't paying attention, was when my first husband died. Ron was diagnosed with colon cancer, and when he had his surgery, his doctor told him that if the chemo worked, he would live another 2 years. And that's if chemo worked. He ended up living almost 4 more years. He went into the hospital a few days before Christmas in 2006. Doctors had him sedated for the first few days. But when they brought him out, it was like he was his same old self again. He was talking, laughing, remembering baseball statistics. We got several more days together that I didn't think we were going to have. It really felt like I got a miracle without me even asking for one. Ron's friends came to the hospital to see him, and one of them was a Missouri Synod Lutheran, and my husband was Jewish. And I know they talked about God. I don't know what they said, but when my husband's friend left that night, he left his little travel Bible with Ron. He never got a chance to read it, but he had it by his side. Ron took a turn for the worse on his last day, and he passed away with me by his side. So there I was, a 37-year-old widow. I had a hard time for a long time after he passed. I remember literally falling on my bedroom floor, hysterically crying. One time I was getting ready for work and started crying. And let me tell you, it's not easy to put on mascara when you're crying. But somehow I got through it. I was coming to church here at Christ Lutheran, but I didn't do any extra praying. I didn't talk to God about it. I still didn't really have a relationship with him, but that didn't matter to him. I know now that he was by my side. I saw a grief counselor for nearly 2 years, and sometimes she would talk about faith. One time she said to me, God doesn't give you more than you can take. And it was at a time I didn't think I could even take what I was given. But then about 2.5 years after Ron passed, I met David. We met online, and he was everything I said I didn't want. I said I didn't want anyone with kids. He has 2 girls. I was 40 at the time, so I said I wanted someone between 40 and 47 years old. He was 49. And I said I wanted someone who was Lutheran because I wanted someone I could go to church with. And David was Jewish. Now, I don't know what it is about me and Jewish men, but I guess that's a different story. Anyway, despite all that, he reached out to me, and turns out we were a perfect match. I always felt in my bones that Ron brought me David, someone who I could love so intensely and without reservation. But here's the third time where I think God was working in my life without me knowing it. I don't think God brought me David for me, although he certainly wasn't opposed to it, but that was Ron's doing. God brought me David for his girls. They were 7 and 12 at the time, and let me tell you, not a fun age to get involved with someone, but they really needed a positive female role model in their life. And that's why I think God got involved. The girls were able to see someone who got up every day, went to work, had a stable life. They got to see what a healthy, loving relationship looked like, and they got to be in a calm house amidst the craziness in their life when they weren't at our home. David's oldest daughter went away to college in Oregon, and I think it was partly because of my pushing. I would tell her that going away is when you realize who you truly are and when you really become yourself. And yes, it turns out that was one of the best things she ever did for herself. The youngest daughter lived full-time with us for a couple of years, and I know that helped her feel safe and that she didn't have to walk on eggshells all the time. Even though she's had her challenges since then, I believe it would have been so much worse if she didn't have David and me. I can only hope that one day the girls will see that and understand the impact I had on their lives. But until then, I can simply thank God for his work in our family and putting me in their lives. So even though I went through all these situations without an active relationship with God, I was actually looking for one. I had said for years, wished I had a more faithful life, a stronger faith. What exactly that means, I don't know. But I do know I wished for more of something. But I also knew I wasn't willing to put in the effort to get it until a couple of years ago. I started to feel a little turning inside of me, that maybe now I was ready to do something to move toward whatever that stronger faith was. I've been coming to Christ Lutheran Church for somewhere around 25 years, and David started coming with me when we began dating, even though he was Jewish, but I never felt the need to become a member. And there were a few reasons for that, but one of them is because no pastor here had ever asked me my name, despite all the years I had been coming. It may sound silly, but it bothered me. The one time during communion, Pastor Garrett asked me my name. I told him, and he said it as he gave me communion. The next week he said, "Remind me of your name again?" I told him, and he said again as he gave me communion. And he never had to ask me my name again. He always remembered my name after that. And I can't tell you how much that meant, that he just asked my name. I remember talking to Pastor Garrett about that, and he said it was important to him to learn everyone's name because in the Bible it talks about the shepherd knowing his sheep by name. So David and I ended up becoming members almost 2 years ago. Of course, he had to get baptized first, which he talked about in his faith story a couple weeks ago, and then we joined. My husband had also decided he wanted to read the Gospels because as a Jew, he had never read them. And after he finished them, he decided to read the first 5 books of the Bible, and then he kept going. So I started feeling like, hey, I'm getting left behind here. If he's going to read the Bible, so am I. And so I am. It's taken me a long time. It's been about 1.5 years, and I am now in Ezekiel. I don't always understand it, but I am determined to get through the entire Bible, even if it takes me another year, maybe longer. So that's one way I'm continuing to develop a stronger faith, by getting closer to God's Word. I also decided to start getting more involved here at CLC. Sometimes I'm most comfortable just dipping my toes in. Sometimes I can jump in with both feet, which I guess is how I ended up here tonight. I go to Paul's Wednesday night Bible study classes. I've gone to the women's wine nights during the summer. It involves wine that's not communion wine, so who wouldn't want to go? I also gave the message at the women's worship night last summer. The last 2 years, Elise Lentini and I have done the giving garland. And let me tell you, when we gather those gifts at the end and they fill the nar, it's impossible not to see God working in this congregation. So with my eyes open to seeing God more, with my ears listening for his voice, I'm continuing to step more into a life of faith. I recently heard Isaiah chapter 42, verse 18, which says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past." So I know God isn't looking back in time when I wasn't reaching out for him. He is for trying to go it on my own. He's here with me now and telling me I can count on him now. I can only hope that when I have more challenges in my life, that I don't fall into my old ways and try to go it on my own, that I remember he is there for me. The song that I asked to be sang tonight is Never Walk Alone. And I know Pastor Garrett gave a sermon a few months ago that said song lyrics aren't everything, but this one says, "I wish I could tell my younger self just to have faith." So yes, I wish I had started my active faith journey earlier in my life. But the song also says, "Looking back, never once did you let me go." So no matter what relationship I had with God, he never let me go. Thank you for listening to my story today.